Welcome to the Attorney Post, your source for inside baseball talk about the legal field with the top attorneys in the country. Here's your host, Justin West.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Attorney Post. Today's podcast is brought to you in part by Hundreds of Customers, LLC. Are you a business owner who knows that being on page one of Google is important, but you're also afraid to work with an SEO company because you know that SEO or search engine optimization is oftentimes very expensive and very slow? Well, not anymore. Rocket SEO from Hundreds of Customers, which is owned by yours truly, forces you to page one of Google safely and legally through the power of the news. National media campaigns that rank you instantly, leveraging the power of ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, and more, can push your website's rankings to page one of Google in as little as 24 to 48 hours. That leverages the power of major media brands to push your website up and also to leverage their brands and get you on page one as well. Visit hundredsofcustomers.com/rocket. That's all spelled out, hundredsofcustomers.com/rocket to learn more or to schedule a consultation with yours truly. Today's interview is sponsored also by mymodernlaw.com. To reach My Modern Law, visit mymodernlaw.com or 480-649-2905 to speak to an attorney who can help you with the areas of divorce and custody law topics. From mymodernlaw.com today, I actually have Billie. And one thing I didn't check on Billie before we started is, how do we pronounce your last name? Is that Tarascio?
It's Tarascio.
Tarascio. Okay, I guessed correctly, which is great.
well, wait. You got to, not the hard A from the Midwest. You get so it's Tarascio.
Tarascio. Okay, yeah, I'm from my Midwestern is showing through.
Yes.
All right. Well, today we're going to be talking about three areas inside of divorce law and custody law, the different mistakes that people make when they're looking to pursue a divorce or pursue a custody discussion, or beyond that as well, and some of the mistakes that people make that they really need to avoid. So, Billie, you are an expert on this area. You obviously own a law firm down there in Arizona that basically focuses on doing this sort of work. So let's just jump right in and tell me a little bit about your practice. How long have you been practicing law? Tell me, how many attorneys are you working with down there? Just kind of give me the 411.
Sure. So I graduated law school in 2005. I went into law school knowing that I wanted to do family law, and it's what I have done my entire career since 2005. The law firm, Modern Law, is mine. I own it, and there are 6 attorneys, and all we do is family law.
Okay. And so what made you decide to get into family law? Is that something that had impacted you in the past, or is just something that you felt called to, or just an area that you felt that you were really knowledgeable in?
My parents went through a divorce when I was 19. So right in that age when I was in school and I knew I wanted to go to law school, and now this area of law was very, very relevant to me. And their divorce was not a pretty one, and it affected me and my brothers and our entire family in a very real way. And it became clear to me that this was a real area of law. This was not pushing paper around. This was not helping people do deals. This was having a massive impact on people's lives, and I wanted to be a part of that.
I've heard some people say that practicing divorce law is kind of like being an unlicensed therapist at times. Do you find yourself having to be in kind of unofficially in therapist shoes at the same times, or do you not really worry about that so much?
We absolutely worry about that, although I describe it, I think, differently than other lawyers do. People who are going through legal issues are in pain, all of them. People who are going through divorce are in a huge transition, and the problems are complicated, and the stakes have never been higher, and that is emotional. And so if that's not something that you're willing to dive into and fully address, then you shouldn't be practicing family law.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess we'll just kind of jump right into this then. Well, first off, now I saw you practice down in Arizona. So what cities do you actually serve? And it looks like, if I saw correctly, you at least had studied up in Oregon. Is that right? So what brought you to the Arizona area? Did I lose you?
Sure. So I did. I graduated law school in. Can you hear me?
Yes, there were.
So I graduated law school in Oregon. I practiced in Oregon, and I moved here with my family and my now ex-husband in 2009 for his job. So I relocated with him, and then opened Modern Law in 2010.
And it looks like your practice is thriving, which is awesome. So let's talk about, I guess, what people face when they're looking into divorce. Now, fortunately, I've never had to face this issue, and God willing, I never will. But I know it's something that, when somebody does have to face a divorce, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of trying to figure out, well, what is the next step? So if somebody is looking at a divorce, maybe they don't have kids, what do you think is the number one mistake that someone in that particular situation, looking to divorce and not having kids, what's the biggest mistake or biggest couple mistakes that they tend to make, and what could they do to fix that? I think we're having
I think that divorce is such a complicated problem, and the legal aspects are part of it, but they are not all of it. It is just one piece. If people don't take actions to protect themselves, that can be a major problem. If you don't have the right information, that can be a major problem. And if you ignore things or don't protect yourself, that can be a major problem, because a lot of these things cannot be undone. So if someone gets a decree, a default decree, or if you're not fully invested in this process, there's not a lot we can do to fix it later.
Okay. So if somebody is curious what their first steps would be, I'm guessing the first thing they should do is just talk to an attorney. Is that probably the best bet?
I mean, I think so. It depends on where they're at in the process. So on average, a person has thought about getting a divorce for 3 years prior to actually filing.
Okay. Wow.
So if you are the person that's filing, you have largely thought about this for 3 years. If you are the spouse of that person, you may have had no idea. And we see that happen all the time. And in that case, you need to get in with a lawyer right away. If you have been served or your spouse has told you they want a divorce and you're blindsided, you have to come see us. Because you need information and you have to catch up on this 3 years that they've been thinking about this. And that doesn't mean that I'm saying that they're thinking about this planning on different ways to screw you. That's not what I'm saying. But like emotionally, they're in a different place. Financially, they may be in a different place. Practically speaking, they may be in a different place. And you need information and allies and advocacy to hopefully make this transition as painless as possible for both of you.
Okay. So that's interesting because, again, you do have obviously two parties in each situation. I'd never heard that the average person thinks about it for up to 3 years. That's a long time to stew. And yeah, I would imagine for somebody getting the initial notice of divorce, that would be quite the rude awakening in a sense. And I'm sure you would go through the whole, the stages of grief or whatever very, very quickly as you try to adjust and get caught up. So I guess next question is kind of an unrelated question. If somebody, maybe they've been thinking about this for 2 or 3 years, but they have kids, what's the biggest mistake people pursuing a divorce make when they have kids?
So this is completely jurisdictional because I've practiced in both Arizona and in Oregon. And in Arizona, there is a presumption of equal parenting time, and there is a presumption of joint custody. So if you have two fit parents, you're probably looking at an equal parenting time as long as people live in the same area. So that policy largely takes this off the table. People worry about, okay, can I move out? If I move out, will I be abandoning my kids? No, you can move out. If I move out, will I be abandoning my spouse? Will I get hit with, criminal charges? That happened. Somebody said that the other day, that their therapist told them they couldn't move out because it would be abandonment. That's just not true. That's a myth. If you need to move out, move out. The most important thing is for you to take care of yourself and take care of your children. So don't move out into a place where you can't have your kids with you. Mm-hmm. If you're try to figure out a way that your children can be okay in two homes, but they're not okay with conflict and they're not okay if their life is massively disrupted. So move towards their school. Make life as easy and simple as possible, because divorce sucks and it's hard on kids and it's hard on you and it's hard on the other parent. So the more you can shrink your world and keep it practically easy, the better. And that's not a legal tip. That's just a life tip.
Yeah, that's a good tip. That is a really good tip. So if someone is pursuing a divorce, does it make sense? Does it matter? Is it real? I'm sure at the end of the day, it's probably situational. Is it better for the person pursuing the divorce to separate themselves with the kids, without the kids, or does it sometimes matter? Does that make sense? I'm trying to formulate that question correctly.
Are you saying if you are moving out, take the kids or don't take the kids?
Basically.
Okay. So I think if you have a situation where you have two good parents and you're going through a divorce because that's what, you tried everything you could and your marriage won't work, then you should try to set up a schedule where your children see both of you as often as possible. You should work together as co-parents as quickly as you can. And get rid of the posturing or don't put your kids in the middle. Just be the best parent you can be, which means lifting up the other parent. That's not really easy for people who are fighting, but your kids deserve that. They didn't choose this. They didn't choose the other parent. So, you shouldn't leave and take the kids and hide them. You should try to work something out. And if you can't, come see a lawyer, because you can get a temporary parenting time agreement that gives you both probably equal access. And sometimes we have to do that because a parent will hoard children to punish the other parent. That's completely different if you've got safety issues. So I'm talking about two good parents.
Okay. So when there's safety issues present, I suppose it would make sense to take the kids.
Absolutely. Don't leave the children where they're unsafe.
Okay. So I didn't know if there was going to be, and I'm sure this is a question lots of people have, are there ramifications if I leave and I take the kids, or if I leave and I don't take the kids? Does that show that I, you'd mentioned abandonment earlier, so I didn't know. I know it's a question people have, is if I leave and I don't take the kids, is that going to affect my chance to have my kids down the road or things like that?
So in Oregon, the answer is yes. They have a status quo order. So if the status quo for the last 3 months is you've moved out and you've left the other parent with primary custody because you moved out while you were working this out, you're kind of in a bad position because the status quo is, mom has the upper hand. That's just not the case in Arizona. Arizona doesn't look at what the status quo was. Arizona assumes that the status quo is changing. Obviously, you're no longer going to be operating as a married couple. Right. And both parents start out on an equal foot unless there's some reason for them not to. It's a very different way of looking at things.
Okay. Sorry, I'm still getting my head right around this stuff. I one of the reasons I love interviewing people is you learn stuff all the time. So let me ask you this. I'm sure people come in and sometimes they bring a lot of stuff with them in the sense of maybe they think that they've taken some steps already before they come to talk to you. What are some of the things that people do that waste a lot of their time and their effort before they come and they talk to an attorney?
Different people need different things. So some people are planners and they need to feel okay and to feel in control. They need to have gone through every dollar in their budget. And the thing with those people, and I have a client like that right now, he's got this all worked out, but the process is slow and the process is imperfect. And he has a wife that does not want to work with him at all. So even though he has this perfectly worked out dollars and cents and fairness, and here's how it's going to work, the system won't meet him halfway and his wife won't meet him halfway. So it can lead to frustration, but that's just who he is. He's a planner. He's a detail oriented, he's a pediatrician. That's what he's, so it's not that that's a mistake. It's just that different people react differently. Better to over-prepare than under-prepare.
I think that's pretty fair. Absolutely. And but sometimes you're being over-prepared just means you wasted some effort in the process of preparing. But I guess it is better still to be over-prepared. Are there certain things people believe about divorce and the process that maybe just aren't true? They come in thinking one thing is going to be the case and it's not, or maybe they believe something that used to be the case but it's kind of become like an obsolete belief. Is there anything like that you encounter on a regular basis?
Well, I mean, what's really interesting is the court system has a way that it does things, like an equal parenting time, and here's the way we're going to schedule it, and that's the preference. And so, but not all families work that way. Mm-hmm. Some families don't work that way. They don't work that way when they're married, and they don't work that way when they're divorced. I've got a client right now who has a very interesting situation where she lives with her husband, but they've been broken up for the last 10 years. So they live in the same house and they're raising their 3 kids, but they're not together. And she's had a boyfriend for the last 10 years and she has 2 kids with him. So 5 kids live in the house with the husband and the wife, but the wife and the boyfriend are raising these 2 kids together, and they're tattoo artists, and like they're living outside the fringes of, they don't operate like my family does or
Right.
your family does. And so they're not well suited for the family court system, which is very cookie cutter. Here's how you should do it. So I always, always, always think it is better for people to figure out a way to mediate. Figure out a way to come up with a plan that works best for your family outside the court system, because the court system is not designed to come up with what's best for your family and your children and your situation.
Okay, that makes sense. Something I see a lot of, I do a lot of digital marketing work, so I crawl around the various corners of the web. I oftentimes see people advertising, all-in-one done divorce packages. What are, some of the reasons people probably should shy away from that, do you think? And, do you think those are ever legitimate? Are there attorneys out there who are just trying to start their practice? Or should you be cautious if someone says they'll do the whole process for, $3.99 or whatever the price happens to be?
Okay, well, there's a lot there. I don't
I'm
have
sure
any problem with flat fees. If there are attorneys out there who offer flat fee divorces, and there are some times when we would offer a flat fee divorce. And if you and your spouse know what you want to do, and you just need a lawyer to make sure that it's done correctly, okay, because it's a huge transaction. But let's say you and your spouse agree on what you want to have happen, and you need someone to effectuate your transaction. I don't know why that couldn't be one flat rate. On the other hand, there are, in general, when you hire an attorney who does a flat fee divorce and it's a low fee, they're a high volume practice, and they, by necessity, must spend a smaller amount of time on your matter. Sometimes that's a good decision. Sometimes that's a bad decision. We like to have very honest discussions about, okay, what's at stake here? What's your legal budget? How much can you afford to spend? And what's a good use of your dollars? So I have Modern Law, which is a law firm, but I have a sister company, Access Legal, which is a legal doc preparer assisted divorce. So it's a paralegal assisted divorce. It's a lower cost, and that's a great option for people who either don't have the money to get the help of a lawyer or don't need a lawyer because they know what they want to do. They just need help getting it done.
Getting through the paperwork and
Right.
dotting the T's and crossing the I's, as they say.
Right, exactly.
So, okay, that's neat. So that now, just to give that a fair plug, that was Access, AXIS. How do you spell that? Or where do people go to find that?
Terrible. Isn't that just a terrible name? I'm working on changing it because you can spell access in way too many ways. But it's accesslegaldocs.com, ACCESS, legaldocs, DOCS.com. Or you can see it through My Modern Law. My Modern Law does link to Access Legal, and we do have DIY options. And we have a ton of information online for people who are doing it themselves, because the fact of the matter is 80% of people end up getting divorced without a lawyer, and they still need help and they still need information.
I didn't know that either. That's really fascinating to know that.
A lot of people.
Would you say, just out of curiosity, is that more people without kids who get divorced without an attorney, or is that more just kind of a random mix? So I imagine once you have kids, you want to be much more careful and again, dotting the I's and crossing the T to be more precise about it. So is that something that people that are just, a couple getting divorced tend to do on their own, or does it vary?
It totally depends. The legal issues, kids, no kids, it doesn't really matter. What matters is how much conflict is there? How much do you disagree on? How difficult is your ex? Are they cooperative? Can you work together? Can you make decisions together or not? But there's some situations where you have a very cooperative couple, a couple who can work together, but they've got a complicated financial situation. And so if you take all the dollars in your transaction and you figure out this is a $500,000 transaction between your house and your retirement and your savings account and your cars, you may very well, like the average person may be looking at a $500,000 transaction. You're going to need some help doing that correctly.
Okay. No, that makes sense. That's that's a lot of money too. You don't
It
think about
is.
how much all of the various assets in your life add up. But yeah, you got a house, you got a car or two, you got a retirement account, you got savings account, and before you know it, man, that's impressive.
Right.
That's
And people, one of my friends said, people go through transactions with real estate all the time and they'll pay a real estate agent, 20, $30,000, but they don't see it. So they don't think about it.
hmm
But that's real dollars that you pay for that transaction. And this is a much, much bigger transaction with
mm,
much more on the line than selling or buying a house. So if you have the money, some people simply don't have the money, so it's not an option to go see a lawyer. But many people don't see the value of seeing a lawyer.
hmm
Um, and I would encourage you to really look at, okay, well, what is the value of this transaction? Not just in terms of dollars, but also, what is this going to look like with my kids for the next, 10 years, as far as what's our parenting plan going to look like? And how much am I going to get or not get in child support? And let's add that up over the next 10 years. How much money am I leaving on the table or overpaying or underpaying? At least you should know before you make a decision.
yeah. Informed consent. I think it's a good practice in general, in
It
all
is.
in all aspects of life. So
Mhm.
I'm sure some people when they find themselves being served with divorce papers, and if my jargon is off, forgive me. I'm sure some people are very tempted to just bury their heads in the sand. What is the thing that really just gets people to refuse to want to face their issues, and how can they get over ignoring it and hoping that it's going to go away? Or what advice would you give them to get them to take care of the situation?
That's a great question. It is, I think, really tempting for people to just bury their head in the sand. I've got a friend who has not lived with her spouse. They've been broken up for 10 years, but she's still married. And there are a lot of people out there who simply, are okay. The other thing is I posted on Facebook the other day, the divorce rate is at an all-time low in 40 years.
That's good
It's an
news, right?
all-time low. Yeah, it is good news. It's 40%. And, the 50% that you heard, well, it's
hmm
been steadily falling since the 80s, and it's now at 40%. And somebody commented it's because people can't afford to get divorced. And there is some truth to that.
Hmm.
There are people who are walking around who are still married, who really aren't married, who are not living as a married couple or shouldn't be living as a married couple, who don't know what to do.
hmm
And if you just go to my website, go to a local courthouse, go to YouTube, you can figure out how to get it done. And if you stay married like that, there are massive consequences because Arizona is a community property state, which means even though for the last 10 years, my friend has not been, living with her husband and he has a new person who he can't get married to because they're still married, but they're not married.
Right.
Um, any debt he has racked up is half hers. Any debt she's racked up is half his and
Hmm.
vice versa. And all during that time, she hasn't been getting child support, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, okay. That's yeah. You think about the division of property and the division of assets, but you don't really think about the division of debts. And yeah, you're and
Mm.
especially if your other one. There's a common meme that's gone around, and it's a billboard that a woman who was divorcing her husband took out. You've probably seen it. It's like, John, I know about Sally. By the way, this billboard was paid for from our joint bank account. So you think about it maybe in the up close or the upfront, closer to the moment of the divorce. But yeah, I guess if you don't get the divorce and it just keeps on going on, I mean, hopefully the person wouldn't wind up being malicious, but there's always the opportunity for someone to be a little extra malicious too, which is just a bad thought. I guess I'm glad to hear that divorce rates are going down. No offense to your practice.
Hmm.
I'm glad to hear that, at least in general, there's a general trend, even if some of that is explained by the cost or whatnot. I've heard some people. I'm curious your thoughts on this, and this is more just an opinion question. Some people say the divorces are going down because people are just not getting married as well.
That's true.
Do you think that's part of
The,
it as
the
well?
marriage rate is going down as well.
So that,
So,
yeah. So between
yeah.
those two things, between the affordability and the just fewer and fewer marriages, maybe that explains at least part of it, for better or worse. What would you say? Are there any kind of divorce issues or custody issues? I'm sure this is a whole nother question. Actually, it's a whole nother show. But maybe you can touch on really briefly for couples who never do get married, and then they
Yeah.
split. What are things that they need to bear in mind?
Well, if you don't have children, then your issue is not a family court issue. So if there's a couple that's been living together, that's been accumulating property together, but they don't have kids and they call our office to get advice, we don't touch that. We don't help them. That's not family court. You have a civil issue. And what's kind of cool about that, it's a lot easier to undo. Man, it's hard to undo a marriage. So when a couple who's been living together for a long time decides to break up, they have to work it out. They have to work out who's going to take what property. They have to work out, the house issue. If it was owned by one person, it's owned by the one person. Yeah. If it's owned by both of them, then they have rights that are property rights, but they're not subject to marriage. Where people, there's no alimony or spousal maintenance if you've lived together but you're not married. It's much more of a transaction where you make your own rules. Whereas if you get married, you're opting into society's rules and the law as to how your life is going to look if you don't stay married. Mm-hmm. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you recommend, and again, this is more an opinion question probably, but do you recommend people going into any kind of relationship? I don't even know if they make a prenuptial for people who don't get married because there's no nuptial agreement, I guess, but and it seems I'm sure it's very unromantic, so people don't even think about it. But do you recommend for couples in general something like a prenuptial to mediate issues in the future should they arise? Or do you think that's just the type of thing that is not necessary, or is necessary and everyone should have to do it, but they don't? Or, what are your thoughts in that area?
That's such a great question. I know before I got married, I had to do premarital counseling, which was, a good idea. It was required because I was Catholic and needed to do that in order to get married in the Catholic Church. Should couples, be required to, I think that it would probably be good for couples to truly sit down every couple years and check in and say, how's this going? Mm-hmm. And if we weren't to be together in the next 2 years, what might we want that to look like? Because having that conversation is going to, keep you honest with one another. And okay, I'm going to do a little tangent, so bear with me.
I operate via tangents all the time, so please.
Okay.
Go right ahead. You're in good company.
Because I went into law school after my parents' divorce, I have literally been studying people's marriage my entire career and trying to figure out, why do people get divorced and how can people stay married? Because I just got divorced. And after a 15-year marriage, and it was something that I wanted desperately to avoid, which is true, I think, for anyone who's married. We want to avoid getting divorced. So what I have come to believe is that the reason people get divorced, the reason marriages fail, is because people have problems in their marriage that don't get fixed. And these problems people will live with for a certain amount of time, and then they won't. But failure to address the issues that are going on within your relationship that are deal breakers, that you will not live with long term, is what causes divorce. So if people were to have this conversation a lot more often, a very serious conversation of, okay, when we got married, here's where we were at, and here's what we expected, and we're different people. That happened. I'm 38 now. There's a lot that changes, and we have 4 kids. Like, there's a lot that changes. So having a very serious conversation every 2 or 3 years of how are we doing and where are we at, and is this still working, and are there things that aren't working for you, and if we weren't to be together, what might our family look like if it were to restructure? Now, people don't want to have that conversation because it's awful, right? We never want to think about getting divorced. But don't we owe it to our kids? Don't we love each other and our children enough to think, okay, if this happens to us, if we can't make it together, how could we be the best we possibly could for our kids and for each other apart? I don't know if that's the prenup discussion, but, and maybe I'm not advocating for a prenup. I'm advocating for something that's a whole lot more than a prenup.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned even like marital prep stuff, and this is something I actually went through. We're Catholic as well, and we had to go through 6 months of prep. And one of the things they do is they sit down and they make you take a test, and the test talks about everything about different aspects of your law or of your lives, from personal lives to your emotional lives to your financial lives. And you really do have to take a stock. And I do think it's interesting. Obviously, I'm a low law sort of a guy. I don't love the idea of lots of overarching laws, but I do think that at least as a recommended practice, something like that on a regular basis makes sense.
Right.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, it sounds like what you're saying is communication. Communication is the key to a good relationship, or even the dissolving, if it has to come to that, of a relationship as well.
Right. But having something like what you just said, like I did the same thing, where you do these tests and you compare them. Your test results would not be the same today as they were when you got married.
Yeah.
And so people should be checking back in and then having an honest conversation.
That's just a really good piece of life advice. It really is.
Well, I don't want you to get divorced. I really don't.
Thank you. We have no intentions, but we have 5 lovely kids, and God willing, we were challenged when we got married. Just to share a little bit with you in the audience, we got married in a church, and my wife's grandparents were there, and they renewed their 60th wedding anniversary, their 60th wedding vows at our wedding, at the end of our wedding. And when they were done, they turned to us and they said, "You got to beat us." And they passed away. Josephine passed away 6 years later, so we have to make it 66 years. We're at about 15 this summer, so we've got a ways to go.
That's awesome.
But we have a goal.
That's awesome.
So thank you. Gosh, this has been a great conversation. Like, I feel like I've learned a lot. Like, it really, I always go into these with some general ideas of, where the conversation is going to go and what we're going to talk about. And I love it when I can leave a conversation like this and be like, man, that's a good idea. And I might even have to talk to my wife. Say, I talked to a lady today, and she specializes in divorce. I don't want a divorce, but one of the things we talked about was, making sure communication is there. And you remember we took that test, and we should do that again. Here's a free thought for you. Make a test and put it on your website that people can use, and just say, have the husband take it, have the wife take it. And I'm sure that there's something out there like that, obviously, but I mean, that seems like such a great resource that people could have. What are, since we're talking about resources, this is a great segue. What are some good resources for people who are looking into the process of divorce?
Well, my website has an enormous amount of information about the divorce process, legally, every single step of it. And I've got a book that I wrote that is for people on the process. If you're going through this yourself, you need this book. But the other thing that
Do you have a copy of that on you right now by any chance?
If you want to give me 1 second, I'll go get it. You got
1 second. We're counting. And of course, while she's getting that, let's hear a word from our next sponsor. InjuryAttorneyLeads.com. InjuryAttorneyLeads.com. Personal injury attorneys spend a lot of time and money on advertising, but it's difficult to get qualified leads. You are paying for leads that are not qualified, or worse, you're getting leads from the internet that are no longer interested in even talking to a lawyer. That's if you can even get a hold of him. These leads can average between $99 a lead on the low end and $400 a lead on the high end, and you can burn through 5 to 10 just to get one serious prospective client on the phone. The solution is InjuryAttorneyLeads.com. InjuryAttorneyLeads.com will live transfer people directly to your firm who have been in an accident and who want to talk to a lawyer about their case. You can be sure that these potential clients will meet your criteria for a qualified lead, and close rates average about 60%. Set up a time to talk with a client generation specialist by visiting InjuryAttorneyLeads.com and scheduling a time to talk. That's InjuryAttorneyLeads.com. But all right, so now you said you had a book, Billie. What is the book, and can you show it to us? Tell us about it, and where can people get this? Can they get it on your website, or even like on Amazon, or what is this?
Yeah, so this is Decode Your Divorce. I wrote it in 2015, right after my daughter was born. It was a great project when I wasn't lawyering. And you can get it on the website. You can get it on Amazon. You can reach out to me via email, and we'll send you an ebook. We give it away to consults, everyone who comes in for a consultation. It's just resources. The law should be free and accessible. And right now there's so much information that people are unable to digest it. So this is a digestible, specific informational guide to divorce in the Phoenix, Maricopa County, Pinell County area. The other thing is we've got a YouTube channel, and one of the things that I've started doing is I started vlogging about all the things I didn't know about divorce until I went through my own. Because even though I was an expert in divorce, going through it taught me so much more that's not legal, that is practical and real, and things that you need to know, and things that really, really matter.
Yeah.
Like I never knew that, like, that I never would have said in the past that you should have a parenting plan for your pet. But our pet goes back and forth with our kids, and she didn't always, and it made a huge difference in her health and in our kids' lives. So like I wouldn't have known that. Or like all of our kids went to counseling and play therapy, and at first I wouldn't have said that all of them needed it, but every single one of them benefited from it. So like just things that I've learned that I think are worth sharing.
I'm gonna go off on a 10-second tangent, but there's a TV show that was canceled years ago called Firefly. I really enjoyed it, and one of the characters is a bounty hunter or an assassin. And at one point he makes a comment, my wife and I bandy this about to each other all the time. He's talking to a doctor, and he says, they make psychologists get psychoanalyzed, but they don't make doctors get cut on. And my wife is a birth doula, and the last time she was giving birth, I made that joke to her. I said, they make psychologists get psychoanalyzed, but they don't make birth doulas give birth. Does that seem right to you? And she had to laugh. But it's kind of interesting. So having gone through the process, so the side joke was there, they don't make divorce lawyers get divorced, but there really is, there has to be a lot of practical knowledge that you gain beyond just the theoretical when you actually go through it. You see, and you care in a way that you wouldn't. You can care all you want about your clients. Obviously, you care a ton about them, but they're not your kids. They're not your husband or ex-husband. So you're always going to have a different relationship to them. So I think it is fascinating to know that you've gone through it and you've gained some insights. And I'd never really thought about sharing custody of a pet. I mean, I know that there's probably actually something that comes up pretty frequently. So I want to ask about that too. So is it a dog or a cat? Was the pet actually, I guess, languishing in a sense, not being able to see both people?
Yeah, she was. So she's a golden doodle. She's a happy go lucky dog, goofy, wonderful, just very emotional. And when I first moved out, my ex-husband was very, very, very angry and wouldn't let her come. And within a few months, she, for the first time in her life, had like sores on her paws that she wouldn't stop licking them. And she was depressed. And after 6 months or so, he decided that she should start coming back and forth. And at first she was so clingy, like she would not leave my side. She was emotionally impacted by this divorce and separation. But after a few months of going back and forth, she was back to her normal self, not anxious, no skin problems, healthy, happy, good to go.
Huh. That's really neat.
They're complicated little animals.
Yeah. And they have an emotional spectrum, they have intelligence. They definitely, I'm a firm believer that pets are never as important as people, but they're still a very important part of the family. And no, it's really interesting that to even think about the pets being affected by a divorce. I've never really thought about that in the past. So again, a lot of eye-opening moments for me as well. That's awesome. So is there any other things that you learned in the process, or anything in your practice that kind of changed after you had gone through the divorce? Just the way that you approached it, or extra steps that you took or added in, having gone through it yourself?
I'm certainly more compassionate. I was always compassionate, but like when I went through a divorce, there was a period of time where I couldn't remember anything. It was like I had lost part of my brain, and I stopped practicing because I really couldn't be a great attorney for my clients. And I did not fully appreciate how stressful it is, and how much compassion we need to be giving our clients and ourselves when you're going through this transition. It's insane. It doesn't compare to law school, it doesn't compare to childbirth or having newborns. It's so hard. And people don't, I didn't know, you know, just how intense of a transition it could be, just how expensive, just how, and I know everything about the legal process.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew the legal process inside and out. I knew every single tool I had available to me legally, and I still didn't fully grasp the enormity of the transition and of the complicating factors. So I just think that we're more checked in. And the other thing is, if you can avoid litigation, I mean, I always have believed in mediation, but now more than ever, I just think that courts are not a place to handle family matters ever. So anything we can do to not be in court is a good thing for families.
Yeah. Again, I guess they have to operate only within the law, and it has to be cold and dispassionate. And as you said earlier, they can't meet you and meet your needs. It's much more of a cookie cutter situation. So, wow. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So let me ask you just a little bit more on the practical level now. Somebody is in the Arizona area and they're looking to get a divorce. Is this something that you guys offer like a consultation about? Or if somebody wanted to, having seen this video and they're like, I need to talk to somebody, how would somebody get a hold of you and what would the steps look like?
Yeah, we'll call our intake team, or you can book online. So you can book a consultation online directly from each of our bios.
That's mymodernlaw.com.
Yes, mymodernlaw.com. You could book a consultation directly there whenever is convenient for you, or you can call our amazing intake team and they will get you in. And yeah, we start every process with a consultation. Then we, our goal during that consultation is truly to understand you, not to talk at you, not even really to educate you. It's to answer your questions and to understand you and to determine your objectives. Mm-hmm. And then the next step is to build a strategy.
Gotcha. And so everyone that gets a consultation with you also does get a copy of that ebook, it sounds like,
yes.
Which is a great resource to have.
You get an actual book.
An actual book if you go in and visit them. Mm-hmm. There you go.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's absolutely no reason to not at least pick up the phone and call, figure out what your options are. And get educated, get some resources, because it sounds like it's a long process. I remember learning in my undergraduate years, they make you take all the extra courses, took some psychology. And I just remember this big chart of like the stress factors in life, and like the number one stress factor other than death of a loved one was divorce. It was like death, divorce, and then a ways down, having a new child, moving, changing jobs, all these other things. But like, it really is, it's like part of your life dies. So having as much knowledge as you can have in that moment, having a support team there in place, all of that just seems so huge. And it seems like it would be a big mistake to not at least pick up the phone and talk to somebody in the area. And obviously, Billie, you seem like you're amazingly knowledgeable about this and just incredibly compassionate. And so if there is anybody out there watching this right now who's at least, entertaining the thought, I would say there's no reason at all not to at least pick up the phone. I think that number is 840-649-2905. I'm sure it's on the website, which is, again...
No, it's actually...
Did I give it wrong?
It's actually... Yes, it's 480-649.
Did I say 408?
You said 804.
804. I'm going to call that spontaneous dyslexia. I'm looking at it correctly, but I think I just read it wrong. So that is 480-649-2905. We'll actually, when this video goes live, we'll have it as well as all your contact information down below the video. And of course, you guys can visit mymodernlaw.com. And you can book times with Billie and her team there, get access to the ebook and everything else. Well, Billie, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today. I've learned a lot. I mean, I really have. Again, in doing an interview, it's often easy just to say, oh, we had a great time and we discussed all sorts of neat stuff. But honestly, I think I really have learned some things I hadn't thought about. And again, I have no intention of ever needing your services, God willing. But even still, I feel like I found things that I can apply to my relationship with my wife and my family, and advice that I can give to people moving forward. As we close, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, whether they're in the area or not in the area, when it comes to this facet of the law?
No. I think we covered everything and
Yeah.
beyond.
Alrighty. Well, this is again Justin West with the Attorney Post, and I just want to say thank you again very, very much to Billie Tarascio. Did I say it
Very
right?
good. Very good.
I can learn. Thank you very much, Billie, for taking the time to talk with me today. It's been absolutely amazing. You guys can always find more of these interviews on theattorneypost.com. We are going to start putting out regular content again in the near future. In fact, once you see this, chances are the regular content is already coming. You can find us wherever good podcasts are found as well. And once again, Billie, thank you so much for meeting with me today. And
Thank you.
I wish you all the best in your practice.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Bye.